Centralia, Pennsylvania, a town burning for over 60 years, a toxic wasteland, isolated, abandoned, and cut off. The real-life inspiration for the horror franchise Silent Hill? But how much of this is real and how much is just hype? We're camping in Pennsylvania this week and decided to check it out for ourselves. And I have to say, it's not at all what we expected. Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, we'll share with you our visit to the ghost town of Centralia in summer of 2023. But stick around to the end. We'll share some beautiful shots of Pennsylvania's Shikellamy State Park, which offer an interesting contrast to Centralia. We're camping in Bald Eagle State Forest this weekend, which is about 70 miles west of Centralia. Tim and I have been hearing stories about Centralia for decades, so we couldn't be this close and not check it out. Just in case you aren't familiar with the story, Centralia was a small coal mining town in the hills of Pennsylvania. In the early 1960s, an underground seam of coal caught fire. It's believed that a fire at the town dump ignited the seam, but it wouldn't be until 20 years later that the relocation of residents started and Centralia became a ghost town. The Centralia fire is often depicted as this raging fire, flames shooting up from cracks in the road, but I'm not sure how accurate that really is. For the most part, it's a slow, smoldering burn underground. It actually took years for the extent of the fire to be known. So the fire started in the early 60s, and it wasn't until the late 70s that people really began to realize the seriousness of the problem. So there were two problems created by the fires. Carbon monoxide would seep out through cracks and natural vents in the ground, creating poor and even dangerous air quality. And then the burning of the coal underground left voids that made the ground unstable and prone to collapse. In places where the seam was closer to the surface, the heat would kill off vegetation, and you could actually feel the heat coming up through the ground. There was a lot of controversy about how to handle the situation. Some residents wanted the government to pay for relocation, while others wanted to stay. Efforts were made from the beginning to put out or block the fire's progression, but none were successful. It's estimated by some that it could have been stopped in 1962 for around $50,000. In the early 80s, that cost had ballooned to over $600 million. In 1984, $42 million was approved by Congress for voluntary relocation, and about half of the residents relocated, with more trickling out over the following decade. In 1992, eminent domain was declared, and a section of State Route 61 was rerouted due to heaving, cracks, and collapses due to the fires. This closed section eventually became Graffiti Highway. Some residents fought eminent domain in battles that went on again for decades. By 2010, only 5 homes remained. In 2013, 7 residents settled lawsuits. They were awarded monetary settlements and the right to stay in their homes until their death or until such a time as they decided to leave. The homes will become property of the state and will be destroyed. So that is my 3-minute summary of a catastrophe that has been taking place over 60 years now. I really want to emphasize that the story is so much more complicated than this. I can only imagine the stress, anger, frustration, anxiety that residents went through from the 1960s until the 2000s and even beyond. I would think it might still be stressful for the residents who live here today. I can't imagine having a bunch of tourists, urban explorers, and looky-loos just walking around the streets outside my house taking pictures day and night all year long. In situations like this, we always try to practice respect and a little bit of restraint. So now in 2023, over 60 years later, what is Centralia like? There were several things that we discovered both during our visit and after when we did a little bit of research that really surprised us. The first thing that was really surprising to us was the location. Based on some videos we had seen and descriptions we had read, we thought Centralia was an isolated town in the hills of Pennsylvania, but it's actually not. It sits less than 2 miles from the small town of Aristes, 2.5 miles from the bigger town of Ashland, and 4 miles from Mount Carmel. While Centralia is a ghost town, these other communities seem to be holding their own. The second thing that really surprised us about the location is that it sits at the intersection of 2 state highways. So there is quite a bit of traffic going through what used to be Centralia. Again, based on some stories we had read, when they closed Route 61 and rerouted it, we were under the impression that it was inaccessible, that Centralia, at least for a time, was closed off and inaccessible. But that doesn't seem to be the case. We would love to hear from anybody who knows more of the history or lives in the area if Centralia was ever actually isolated and inaccessible. There were more houses in the town and in the area than we expected there to be. There's one house right on the main road that gets a lot of publicity. There are a few other houses in town, though, and quite a few on the outskirts. And so we were a little surprised by how many people we saw still living in the area.
Couple houses with a swimming pool.
Again, because that isn't often portrayed. One of the most surprising things to us, and something to be aware of if you're headed to Centralia, is that Graffiti Highway no longer exists. In spring of 2020, the state of Pennsylvania began covering it with gravel and rubble. It sounds like there were several reasons they made this decision. At that time, there was a lot of activity there, probably because of the pandemic. There were more people visiting. There were still concerns over safety due to the heaving and cracking and even potential fumes still. There had also been some accidents, ATV accidents, reports of people camping out on Graffiti Highway, and complaints about the type of graffiti. Just pile after pile of rubble as far as the eye can see, just like that. So we don't necessarily have problems with graffiti as long as it's not damaging people's property. But we also think there's a difference between beautiful graffiti that could be called artwork and what we call hormonal teenage graffiti. And it sounds like this had been a problem and a complaint for quite a while. There are 3 cemeteries that are still active in the town, a church that still holds services regularly. The church has several signs posted that access is for parishioners only. So I imagine this is one of the places where they've had problems with tourists being intrusive. The church is quite striking. It sits up on a hill on the edge of town. And there is a municipal building that houses a fire department and police station. A couple of the most surprising things we actually discovered afterwards when we did a little bit of research. Apparently, underground mine fires aren't that uncommon. Here's a map of mine fires in Pennsylvania as of 2020. Centralia is definitely the worst. It's expected to burn for approximately another 250 years, but it's not the only fire of this magnitude. The oldest known coal seam fire is in Australia called Burning Mountain, and it's estimated that it's been burning for 6,000 years. There are coal seam fires in almost every major developed country in the world. What makes Centralia stand out is that most of these other ones are in relatively uninhabited areas. We didn't see any smoke or steam or smell anything unusual in the air. We've heard that if you come in the winter, you are more likely to see the steam, which of course makes sense. Like I said, we've been fascinated with the story of Centralia for decades, but now having been there, if you didn't know what was going on here, you would just drive right through and think, oh yeah, it looks like there used to be something here at some point, but you might not even realize what had happened. For us as outsiders, we're fascinated with the story, and it inspires our curiosity and imagination. But honestly, having been there, there's not that much to see. And I can't help but wonder for locals if it's all just become a big nuisance. We did discover some interesting things, though. Just on the outskirts of Centralia was the little community of Burnsville, which was also destroyed due to the fires. There is a shrine to the Blessed Mother here. Down in the town of Ashland, there is a geyser right off the side of the road, the Big Mine Run geyser. And we decided Mount Carmel probably has more churches than we've ever seen in a town of this size. At least one of the churches, I think it's St. Peter and St. Paul, relocated here from Centralia. Divine Redeemer Catholic Church. What is this one up here? There's the sign right there. Yeah. I don't know what that one is. There's one right here. Divine Redeemer Parish.
This is a holy stream.
Yeah. So we'll probably turn left here.
Yeah.
St. Michael's Orthodox Church. And then here's another church.
This is the holy corner of town.
Wow. On the way back, we decided to stop at Shikellamy State Park, which is at the juncture of the Susquehanna and West Branch of the Susquehanna River. This whole area of Sunbury and Northumberland is an area we wouldn't mind coming back to explore more at some point. There's another branch up there. Deer trail. Very well-trained deer, babe. Stay on the trail. We hope you enjoyed coming along with us today as we explored Centralia. In the next video, we'll be headed to Allegheny National Forest. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.